Russia sent over 180,000 troops to invade Ukraine on February 24, 2022. Since 2006, the Kremlin has been preparing for this war. Hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on modernizing Russia's military, stabilizing the economy, and expanding Russia's global influence. The only thing left for Putin to do was give the order to attack and wait for the good news. The following day, Putin arrives in Kiev, delivers a victory speech, and Russia checkmates the West before they realize what has occurred. However, something went wrong. In fact, many things went wrong. Ukraine aimed to win the information war by controlling the narrative, used U.S. intelligence to keep Russia from taking over Kiev, and pushed the rest of the world to cut ties with Russia, and it succeeded. Companies have literally begun to leave Russia. BMW has ceased production in Russia. IKEA exited the country after selling its factories. Google, IBM, Airbnb, Netflix, PayPal, Samsung, Starbucks, Visa, MasterCard, and Coca-Cola all abruptly exited Russia. Russian banks were kicked out of the international financial system, and it was no longer possible to send money to or from Russia. Russia's economy, according to experts, will implode. That's worse than a depression, not to mention a recession. The U.S. launched a series of financial attacks against the ruble. The ruble lost half its value and jumped from 70 to 140 rubles per dollar. Overnight, it seemed as if the entire world declared war on Russia, and everyone predicted that Russia would collapse in a matter of months. So the question is, what is the current state of Russia's economy? Why hasn't Russia collapsed yet? And how long can it withstand Western sanctions before Russia as a state disintegrates into a slew of small puppet states? How Russians safeguarded it is money. The United States' first goal was to crush the Russian currency, because crashing the currency creates chaos in the economy and causes everything else to crash in a domino effect. The United States prohibited the Russian government from acquiring foreign currency, pressured U.S. companies to leave the country, and the entire world desired to sell everything they had inside the country and leave, which meant selling all of their Russian rubles and purchasing dollars. The Russian ruble began trading at half its previous value. The price of a currency is usually determined by supply and demand. If people suddenly start selling their rubles, the currency will begin to fall. And at some point, people will lose faith in the currency, resulting in hyperinflation, as was the case in Germany after World War I or Zimbabwe in 2006. However, this did not happen to Russia because the U.S. did the same thing in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. So Russia was prepared this time. It has amassed over $630 billion in foreign reserves, allowing the Russian central bank to intervene and artificially create enough demand for the ruble to keep it from collapsing. And as Western companies began to leave Russia one by one, and Russia was isolated from the global financial system, Russia responded by prohibiting foreign speculators from shorting or trading the Russian ruble. Russia also restricted the use of foreign currency within the country. First and foremost, ATMs could no longer be used to withdraw US dollars or euros. Since Russia was kicked out of SWIFT, you couldn't send them outside of Russia, and you couldn't even keep them in your bank account because Russian banks charged a 12% fee for keeping foreign currency in your account. As a result, everyone had to sell their dollars and euros in order to keep their money, creating a huge demand for the ruble. Whatever foreign currency businesses received inside Russia was automatically converted to ruble, at least 80% of them, increasing demand for Russian rubles and making the Russian ruble the best performing currency in the world. That's how Russia's currency was saved. Russia is becoming a landlocked country, but that was only the beginning. The worst was yet to come. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is about to turn the country into a landlocked country. Wait a minute. Isn't Russia the world's largest country? Isn't Russia the country with the most ocean access? That is both yes and no. The geography of Russia is both its strength and its weakness. The western half of Russia is home to nearly all of the country's population. Because Vladivostok is a 9-hour flight from Moscow, its ports in the east are worthless. So getting everything from Vladivostok to the west of Russia is a nightmare. In fact, the region as a whole is underdeveloped. It doesn't even have a functioning infrastructure. The situation is no better in the north. It is freezing for most of the year, ships cannot pass through, and there are no major cities because the cold weather makes living there unbearable. That is why Peter the Great waged war against the Swedish Empire to annex St. Petersburg and establish it as Russia's new capital. With this new city's access to the Baltic Sea, Russia could finally trade with Europe. However, Russia remained at the mercy of Sweden, which could easily block Russian ships crossing the Danish route. Russia has always maintained a positive relationship with Sweden for this very reason. However, as the wise man once said, never put all of your eggs in one basket. That is why Russia began looking for new ways to trade with the rest of the world. The only way to reach the Mediterranean Sea was to cross the Bosphorus Strait, which was controlled by the Ottoman Empire, which is why the Russian Empire was constantly at odds with the Ottomans. By 2022, it is under the control of Turkey, a NATO member. This means that Sweden's accession to NATO effectively makes Russia dependent on NATO for access to the oceans. NATO can now block Russian ships, severely limiting Russian trade and potentially crippling the Russian economy. And if Ukraine wins this war, Russia will be forced to relinquish Crimea, limiting Russia's power in the Black Sea and rendering the world's largest country landlocked. China and India will not be able to replace Europe. But that isn't even the most serious issue. Russia's entire economy revolves around supplying raw materials to Europe, such as oil, gas, wood, and anything else that Western Europe requires to keep their industries running. German factories, for example, will not survive without affordable gas. Prior to February 2022, Russia supplied nearly half of Europe's total gas supplies. Russia spent tens of billions of dollars to build these pipelines, and now Russia has stopped supplying gas to Europe in an attempt to persuade Europe to turn against Ukraine, but it has failed miserably. Europe is now spending billions of dollars to diversify its energy sources, and has signed multi-billion-dollar deals with other gas-exporting countries such as Qatar, which means that even if the war ends, regardless of who wins, Russia will no longer be able to sell its oil and gas to Europe in the same way it did previously, significantly reducing its budget. Naturally, it is attempting to sell its oil and gas to China and India. They will not be able to replace Europe for two reasons. For starters, China and India do not pay the premium that Europe did for Russian gas. Second, Russia lacks the resources to build the same number of pipelines to China that it spent decades building to Europe. So, regardless of how the Ukraine war ends, Russia's economy is doomed. Even if Russia annexes the entire Ukraine, it will have a completely damaged country that must be rebuilt. And as you may have guessed, this war has depleted all of Russia's resources, implying that Russia will face a period of political and financial instability regardless of how the conflict ends. The entire Russian economy is reliant on high-tech imports. It cannot manufacture cars without Western equipment, nor can it construct planes, smartphones, or computer chips, nor can it construct civilian planes. Russia is becoming increasingly reliant on China because it has no other choice. China is purchasing its oil to fund the government's budget and to replace everything else that Russia can no longer obtain from the West. It is transforming Russia into China's puppet. Most importantly, it lost its reputation as the world's second most powerful military. Russia's military was never the second most powerful, but it successfully projected itself as capable of competing with the U.S. military. However, the United States' far superior weapons compelled many countries to abandon Russian weapons in favor of U.S.-made weapons. This war will almost certainly leave Russia with a crippled economy that will require decades and trillions of dollars to restore to pre-war condition, effectively ending Russia's ambition to become a global superpower. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.